you see that? This tea is hot. I think that the worst decision that I made was to buy these dang Oreos. They're gluten-free. They are not guilt-free. Oh, there's the little kitty. I wish I could show you. It was very cute. Cute. That's the disadvantage of having windows where I'm doing this recording. I'm sorry. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Megan, and I talk about true crime. I'm here every Wednesday, and I'm really excited that you're here. I brought a basket of all of my self-care stuff, and that's kind of what we do. We are just going to be doing face masks, nails, kind of whatever self-care sounds like fun, and getting ready for bed while I tell you a true crime story. Hey guys, welcome to my first segment of True Crime at Bedtime. I am going to start out with removing my makeup, which means I'm going to take my glasses off, so a lot of this is going to be from memory. So, Israel Keyes was born in Utah. He was born to a pretty religious family. They were conservative, but to like an extreme. If you know, like, I believe it was a very conservative Mormon family, but I don't know that the Mormons necessarily would like to claim them. They moved to Washington when he was a kid, where they left the Mormon church and actually became a part of two different churches, one of which is the Ark Church, which is known for like fundamentalist Christian beliefs, as well as things like white supremacy, kind of just some really terrible things, like a terrible background. One of the key points that they think that really affected Israel into his growing up life is the fact that he was kind of able to dehumanize anyone, which ultimately is really scary when you think about the fact that like he could take the humanity from anybody, and that's what made it so easy for him to be able to do what he did. And they believe that came from that. He grew up with neighbors who were a part of that and who were also extreme white supremacists, and even spent some time in jail for exactly that. The neighbors did, not Israel. So, he was the second of 10 children to Heidi and John Jeffrey Keyes. So, he was one of the older Key children. It's said that when he was growing up, he grew up hunting and things like that, all of which is pretty common. I would say like in rural areas of the West Coast. Let's say rural areas, kind of just in general. It's pretty common. You go hunting, fishing, you just spend time in the woods. You know, a lot of people will supplement their freezers, whatever, with meat. It saves a lot of money. Ultimately, you don't have as big of a grocery bill, which I think a lot of people appreciate. So, but it was said that Israel Keyes basically like had a fascination with harming animals and like essentially just torturing them. He would kill deer and gut them before they were dead, and which any respectable hunter, you always kill your animal and you make sure that it's dead and you don't do anything to it until it's fully dead. It's out of respect for the animal, because we're not out here trying to be terrible people, you know, we're just out here trying to feed our families. So Israel did not follow that belief. He was all for the torturing of any animals, and things like that. So when Israel was about 17, he met a girl who was quite a bit younger than him, who gave him, it was at a local pool, I believe, some kind of community area, who gave him all of her like contact information, address, everything. She had 2 prosthetic legs, and it sounded kind of like she had a hard time making friends due to her disability. And so she met him. He was very kind to her, gave all of her contact information, her address, all of that. She went missing shortly after. Unfortunately, they found one of her legs by one river about 6 months after she went missing, and found her body about a year later. There is not necessarily anything completely connecting Israel to this disappearance. The friends of this girl reported it later on, like years later. They'd had this secret for so long, which I can't imagine. But it was never confirmed to be completely true that he did have anything to do with this girl's disappearance. There was never any evidence. And I honestly don't know how much they investigated into that, due to the fact that he'd never done anything like that before. And was arrested in 2012. He did spend a few years in the army. He was described as being very much like a loner. He kept to himself. He was pretty quiet. He really just didn't have a lot going on. They said that the coworkers and other people who knew him said that he was a perfectly nice guy. They didn't necessarily get any red flags from him. They just, knew that he was just kind of quiet. They never would have necessarily suggested or thought that he could have been the person that he ended up being. They just said that he was quiet. Quiet does not equal serial killer, thankfully. When Israel was in his teens, he read Mindhunter. If you don't know what that book is, it's basically just all about FBI profiling. It's very fascinating. Ultimately, if you're into things like this, you'll probably be interested in that, and the psychology of why serial killers do what they do, and ultimately, like, how the FBI was able to start tracking them. It's very fascinating. There's also a Netflix show, basically, that goes in and tells that story, and it's really good. I think that they quit making it, which is really disappointing, because it really was a fantastic movie. Israel, I'm reading my notes, I'm sorry. Israel he served in the army from 1998 to 2001. He was stationed in Egypt. Fort Hood, which I think we should do an episode about, because Fort Hood is terrifying. He was also stationed in Fort Lewis. He excelled in the army. They believe that was from the structured environment he had. He would often fund his this is so ridiculous, his killing but his murders, his trip to get there and everything, by robbing banks. Which, how did this guy not get caught sooner? That blows my mind that he didn't get caught any sooner than he did. Great job, guys. I don't know. The craziest thing seems to be that he didn't really have any kind of MO at all. So let's get into his crimes. Let's talk about the crime that got Israel caught, and then we'll kind of work backwards from there. On February 1st of 2012, Israel Keyes was driving around Anchorage, Alaska, looking for an open coffee cart. If you haven't been to Alaska, then you might not know. I'm not sure if there's another state that really does this, but all over Alaska, there are these small little coffee carts. They're just drive-ups. A lot of times they'll have a window on both sides, and they'll be kind of long and skinny. And it's everything that you could need to make coffee. They have everything. It's essentially just a coffee shop, but you can't go in, if that makes sense. You just drive up and grab your coffee, and you go. So he was looking for one of those, and he drove up to Common Ground Coffee. And they just happened to be open. It was 8 o'clock, I think exactly, when he walked up to the window and ordered a Americano. how they didn't know that he was a serial killer is beyond me by ordering an Americano. Anyways, so he orders his Americano, and the barista, her name is Samantha, she makes it for him and is handing it over to him through the window when he pulls out a gun. And he tells her that she needs to listen to him, and if she does, then she will make it out alive. So between the gun and the threat, I'm sure that, I can only imagine, had to be terrifying. So she listened and obeyed. He took all the money from the cash register and she listened to him and did everything that he said for her to do. He took everything from the cash register, her identification, her debit card, and her phone, and tied her hands and forced her to get into his white pickup truck, where he then drove her to his house, where his girlfriend and 10-year-old daughter were. He took her out to the shed that he had in the backyard and tied her up and left her there for a little bit. He went into his house, hung out with his girlfriend and daughter. I don't know what all. Went back to the shed, and where he proceeded to sexually assault her, and then he strangled her to death. He told her that he wanted to keep her alive because he wanted a ransom. And she was like, my family they don't have money, so you're not going to get anything. And he had said, well, they're going to raise community funds. People always come up with money so that they can get their family members. I mean, okay, whatever. So he killed her. He'd been playing really loud music this whole time so that nobody realized, like, what was going on or heard her screaming. He stuffed her into a box and left her in the corner of the shed. And he went into his house, got his daughter packed because they were taking a trip. He took a shower, got ready, took their bags, put them on a taxi or something, and drove to the airport and flew out to New Orleans so that they could go on a 2-week cruise. Great. You gotta relieve some stress after murdering somebody. How classy. So, came back after 2 weeks and realized that her body still looked pretty lifelike because it had frozen because it's February in Alaska. So, he somehow thawed her out. I never have heard how. I don't know if he says it somewhere in some interview that I didn't listen to. I listened to quite a few, but there's hours and hours and hours of interviews available out there, so I didn't listen to them all. But he did that, put makeup on her, braided part of her hair. Whose makeup did he use? That's my question. Did he go pick some up? Did he use his girlfriend's and then put it back? I can't imagine. I'm going to go wash off my face mask and I will be right back with more of the story. He used probably his girlfriend's makeup because that's classy. And he made her up and braided her hair, got her all ready, took a picture, and then edited that photo to be like, oh, he took a picture and she was made it look like she's holding a Anchorage Daily News, which is like the Anchorage newspaper, from like 2 weeks after like she had been killed. So as like a proof of life kind of deal. And the worst part of this graphic notice is that he took fishing line and sewed her eyes open so that she would like fully look like she was awake. How messed up is that crap? Come on. Are you serious? Seriously. So, he then texted her boyfriend, who had been frantic, wanting to know where she is. He was actually who was supposed to be picking her up from work that day. So I can only imagine he was running like a couple of minutes late. He got stuck at work himself. So I can only imagine like the feelings that the boyfriend had to be having after all of that. I can't. Jeez. I can't imagine. Like how I would feel, you know? He then took that, texted the boyfriend a location and said, hey, go here and look under this thing. And he essentially was like, okay, go look under this. There's information for you. Right? And I think the boyfriend like thought that maybe they were going to be hearing like the location or something, but all it was actually a ransom note with that like proof of life on it, being like, here she is, give me $30,000, which is what he said. Wanted a $30,000 ransom for her, and if they gave that, he would return her to them. Liar. So the boyfriend and the dad, I think that at that point, like, you just have to be hopeful. I feel like, I don't know. I've never had that situation happen to me, and I hope I never do. But I think you would just have to be like, okay, like, I'm going to believe that this is going to happen. So what they did is they couldn't get $30,000 right away. So what they chose to do was they got $5,000, and they deposited $5,000 into Samantha's bank account. Remember, he took her debit card, and he had been making withdrawals. I don't think she had a lot of money in there at the time, but he'd been making small withdrawals using that. And so they got together, the dad and the boyfriend got together with the FBI, and they were like, hey, look, this is what's going on. We need help. Samantha has been taken, and blah, blah, blah. The FBI started tracking her with the withdrawals that were coming from her bank account. And they would show up as soon as they would, like, dispatch somebody as soon as they saw something coming through. And unfortunately, they were not able to catch him that way. He made several, I think, $500 withdrawals, which was as much as he was able to take at a time from her bank account. And suddenly, they stopped coming from Alaska, and they started pulling from New Mexico and Texas. They seemed to be following this one very specific highway that goes through both of those states. So the FBI was tracking these. They saw them coming in through New Mexico and Texas. And so they saw he's going to be following this one highway, or they put out a notification letting them know, like, here's we're looking for somebody driving this thing, because they were able to see him make a withdrawal in, I believe it was New Mexico. He made this one, and they were able to see a white car in the ATM camera. So they notified the police that were a little further up that road, and were like, hey, just keep an eye out, because he's coming your way. We don't know who he is, because I forgot to say this. Every single time he would make a withdrawal, he would be wearing like a full mask, like clothes that would like unidentifiable, and gloves, so there was no fingerprints to track, which is annoying. How dare he? He should make it easier for people to kill. No. That's very annoying. He should make it easier for people to track him. Criminals are getting to be too dang good these days. His mistake, ultimately, that he made by making it so that that car that he had rented was in the frame of that ATM cam, was the mistake that got him caught. So a few days later was an officer that was patrolling, and he saw this white Focus that matched the description of the car that they had received the information about. So he followed it. Had been parked outside of some kind of motel or hotel or something like that. Waited for someone to get in. He followed it and waited for them to make any kind of traffic violation. And thank God they did. I think he sped or something by just a couple miles. So he pulled him over. And guess what? His driver's license was an Alaska driver's license that belonged to Israel Keys. So he took him into the station. And when they did a search of the car, they were able to find Samantha's ID, her debit card and her phone, as well as a .22 pistol that it was in the car somewhere. So with that, they were able to arrest, like, keep him, not just hold him for a certain amount of time. Like, they were able to, like, full on arrest him. You go into jail, boy, kind of deal. And they started to question him. And when they ran his background, he had almost no record. He had a DUI in Washington, and a citation for driving without a valid license. I believe that was also in Washington, but it sounded like it had been quite a few years since those had happened. Ultimately, nothing all that terrible that you would be expecting from somebody who just murdered someone. Was had him in custody. They called the police in Anchorage, and they sent him out to his house, where they found that he had a white Chevy truck, just like they had seen in the footage that they hadn't been able to narrow down. It's way too many white Chevy trucks you're not going to be able to narrow down in Anchorage. So they found that. And then 2 weeks after he was taken into custody by the police in Texas, he was extradited to Anchorage, Alaska, where he admitted to killing Samantha Koenig. There, he refused to give any other details except for the fact that he had murdered her, until he was given a Starbucks Americano. See? Serial killer. A Snickers. And I read I can't remember who it was. Somebody had said that it was like a peanut butter Snickers. Yikes. And some kind of specific cigar. I couldn't find what kind it was. And they didn't really want to give him that, but they did, because they needed the information. As soon as he had all of those things, he started sharing all of the information. He had just happened to stumble upon Common Ground the Common Ground coffee stand, and it was the only one that was still open. He had no plan of killing Samantha. She was just in the wrong place at the right time. He just had planned on killing someone. He explained in great detail how he put her in the shed, and I'm not going to go into great detail. Played loud music so that no one could hear what was going on. He sexually assaulted her, then went back to the coffee shop to get her money, her phone, and her debit card. Once he came back, he strangled and stabbed her and stuffed her into a box and went into the house to get ready for his 2.5-week trip. If you ever go watch any of his interviews, even just a couple minutes, you'll see the demeanor that he has. He's kind of like leaned back in the chair, sipping a drink. He laughs a whole bunch. And the way he talks about it is kind of just insanely nonchalant. Like if I were to be telling you, like, yeah, this is a fantastic hair ribbon thing. Scrunchie. I can't talk. I would just be telling you, and then I'd be like, oh, wow, like, my cat over there, she just jumped off the cat. Like, so incredibly just like, yeah, whatever. Like, I killed people. Tough. Like, it doesn't make sense to me at all. No remorse, no guilt, no, like, oop, probably shouldn't have done that. He actually said at one point, he was like, back when I was smart. And I think that was before he did a mess up with Samantha Koenig's murder with the car. So I thought it was interesting that he referred to himself as back when he was smart. You weren't smart when you started being like this. He was very calm, cool, and collected the entire time. And that's kind of when they started to think that maybe Samantha hadn't been his first victim. How could she have been for him to be this nonchalant about everything that had gone on? He explained how when he got home, he saw that she'd frozen and that she looked incredibly lifelike. He thawed her out, applied her makeup, never said who, still curious, never will know probably. Sent out a text to the boyfriend, and then he dismembered her. And if you've ever been to Alaska or know very much about Alaska, you know that ice fishing is a pretty common pastime for a lot of people. And often you will take like a little, I can't think what they're called, like a little shack, basically. It's like a tent, but a lot of times they're like insulated a little bit. It kind of just depends on how bougie you are. I grew up sitting on the ice, and I only went a few times. I hated it. But he went out there, and every once in a while, he'd just throw a little piece of her body into the water. It took him 3 trips, And the part that really screwed me up from this whole thing is that he kept all of the fish that he caught when he was out there throwing her remains into, I believe it's Matanuska Lake. Yep, Matanuska Lake. And it took him 3 trips. And so I'm sure he caught quite a few fish. He brought all of the fish home to his family and cooked them for dinner. Classy. Real classy, buddy. That's about as classy as using your girlfriend's makeup to put on a dead body. Jeez. When he was telling the FBI or the police officers, I don't know if it was the police officer or FBI that were doing this specific interview, he laughed as he told them that he had taken the fish home and fed them to his family. So, cool. And like I said before, classy. He very much seemed like he was trying to keep control over the conversation as they were doing the interviews or interrogations or whatever you want to call them. And anytime that he seemed like he felt like he didn't have any control, he would just close up. There's nothing that you could get from him. And he would make more demands. So he shared the names of 2 victims. Then he said he wanted a few things before he would proceed. He said that he wanted all the information to be kept out of the media, which that's not how that worked. He did not want it to get back to his 10-year-old daughter and then become this, and I quote, some true crime bullshit, like special, basically, which I think is hilarious because I feel like I'm doing my job in spiting. Is that even a word? Spiting this man by essentially making him like the first one. It's kind of like, yeah, I heard what you said. Screw you. And then he wanted an immediate execution date. That's also not how that works. So they decided to try and work with him because they still needed information in order to know who else. They really didn't have any clues on who else he had murdered, but they knew there had to be more. They suggested that he start sharing all of the information, and the more information he was able to give, the closer of an execution date he was going to get probably ultimately, and the faster his trial was going to go. He started to tell them how he had different kill kits. There were these orange Home Depot buckets, you probably know what I'm talking about, like 5-gallon buckets with lids, and he would put guns, ropes, knives, Drano, which he used to make bodies decompose faster. Yikes. Garbage bags, anything like that. Ammo. It sounded like they were all like a little bit different. All over the place. I think they said that there's like 11 of them that haven't been found or something like that. It's crazy. I'll put a picture. He would hide these, and then he would wait for up to years before he would go out and use that to kill somebody. The kind of patience that he had was really one of those things that they were like, well, that doesn't fit what normal serial killers are like. A lot of serial killers, as you know, are impulsive or they stalk people. They always know what they're doing and they have a plan, and he didn't really seem to have much of one. Ever. It was more of like, I want to go kill somebody. Where do I want to go kill him? Yeah, let's go there. All right. I already have a kill kit planned. Like, it's just weird. He did have a few things that were moral, ethical codes for him that, whatever, don't make a lot of sense. He would never kill children. He said that after he had his daughter, he decided then that he would never harm another child. The way he said it made them feel like he had, which brings us back to the girl that we talked about earlier, that they believed that maybe he had murdered, but they never did get any confirmation of that. So then there might have been more. Who knows? He would not kill mothers who have children. Classy. But fathers were good. Sounds like he had some issues there. And he would never hurt a dog, which, thank God. This guy's messed up enough. He didn't need to be killing dogs. That would have been an issue. That would have crossed a line there, Israel. Jesus. What the heck? Like I said before, classy. Keep it classy, buddy. It seemed like he had perfected killing animals before he decided to start killing people. It also seemed like maybe animals had gotten to the point where they just weren't really enough for him. So he escalated it. He was using Samantha Koenig's debit card on his way to his sister's wedding. He didn't make it to the wedding. Sorry, sister. After he killed Samantha, it seemed like his urge did not subside the way that it usually would. They believe that he killed or was planning to kill on the way to the wedding. They believe that he had 11 or 12 victims, possibly as many as like 36. There was never any confirmation for more than, I believe, 3 or 4 of his victims. Israel admitted to killing 4 people in Washington. These murders have not yet been confirmed and are part of an active investigation by the state police and FBI. So they are not included in that total number of, I believe, 3 or 4 that are officially like confirmed murders by Israel. He confessed to 1 murder in New York State. They do believe that he did do that one. He owned 10 acres and a very dilapidated cabin in the town of Constable in New York. So he did have ties to New York State. And he did rob the community bank in Tupper Lake, New York in April of 2009. That was confirmed by the FBI. He also told authorities that he did rob a bank in Texas and that he burglarized a home and set it on fire. They were not able to find any record of any of those things, so they're kind of just calling that as unconfirmed, but not saying necessarily that he did not do it. Seems like the guy was really kind of capable of anything that he wanted. He also admitted to killing Bill and Lorraine Courier, Currier, I think, and who are from Essex, Vermont. He'd broke into their home on the night of June 8th, 2011, and he got in through, there was like a broken garage window that he like finished breaking. He tied them up and had them put their slippers on before he got into their car, loaded them up in their car, and took them to this rundown, abandoned farmhouse. The way that he chose them was that he had planted a kill kit about 2 miles from their house 2 years prior to going back to Vermont to kill someone. And he noticed that there was no dog toys, there was no kids' toys or anything like that in the backyard. And so that was how he chose them. Wrong place in the wrong time. He had them put on their slippers because he didn't want them to get cut on the glass that was on the ground from when he broke in. And that's where I feel like he had some kind of feelings. Like, how can he be planning on killing somebody and then not want them to step on glass and hurt their feet? I have a hard time just like wrapping my mind fully around that. Like, why would that matter? When they got to the farmhouse, he put Bill downstairs and put Lorraine upstairs. Lorraine had been able to escape momentarily leaving the car, but he tackled her and dragged her into the farmhouse, unfortunately. Bill, once they were in the farmhouse, he was able to break free, and Israel just shot him. He just didn't even want to deal with it. And then he sexually assaulted Lorraine, killed her. I believe he stabbed and strangled her. And then he claims to have put their bodies in garbage bags and left them in the house. And then the house was actually destroyed not long after. That was the only answer that they ever got for Bill and Lorraine. So they really did just take that as fact. No one else ever came forward. And he seemed to have enough details that it really had to have been him. They really just are calling that his, and it's terrible. I guess that they were very loved people. They were very kind. He was a vet tech at a university, it sounded like. Loved animals. I don't know how he could have murdered somebody who loved dogs if he loved dogs, but yes, your code of ethics doesn't go that far. The FBI spent 12 weeks searching that site and the local landfill, hoping to find something, anything that could have tied the bodies to that location, but they never did. And one thing that he was actually really good at was always hiding his DNA. Congratulations, buddy. You really won out with that one. They were never able to tie him to anything through DNA until they found the kill kit. And there was actually only one bullet that had like a partial fingerprint on it that was matched to him, and that was it. Which, if you know anything about forensics or anything, like, it's honestly pretty impressive. He was actually, I forgot about this. He was actually upset when they found the fingerprint because he felt like he hadn't done his job well enough. All right, buddy. He told them when he was about 18, he was working on the Deschutes River in Oregon, and he noticed a group of people who were tubing. One woman was floating behind the rest. He drug her out of the river, pulled her into a bathroom, and sexually assaulted her. And he said that it was never reported. And he was going to kill her, but she kept talking to him and was able to humanize herself, is what it sounded like. And he said that was the last time that he ever let anyone go. Then he went on to say that he killed one person in Hamea Bay, 2 people in Washington. He killed a female by strangulation and a male by a shovel, and then he buried them. And then in 2005 and 2006, he killed people. One he put into Crescent Lake in Washington. He said that was the deepest lake, and I should have researched that, but I didn't. And he used an old anchor to weigh them down. Oh, he put both of them in there. And he killed one in New York. After his daughter, he said that he wouldn't harm children, but the way he said it really made him sound like he had harmed children before that. In 2009, in New Jersey, Deborah Feldman went missing on April 9th. He claims to have killed her and then took her remains to New York to dispose of them. This was the only person that they were able to tie to him electronically. This guy just remembered everything. He would remember where he put his kill kits. Like years later, he would remember the locations of where he had put anything, really. The only person that they were able to find on his laptop, like to connect to him, was Deborah Feldman. It sounded like maybe she was homeless or had some kind of history with homelessness. And so when she went missing, people were worried about her, but she wasn't necessarily like a high priority person for them to find, which is really sad because she's a human. But I don't know. He admitted to robbing a bank not long after killing her. They never did confirm that. But the weird part was that when they brought up Deborah Feldman, he kind of freaked out. I think it's because he felt like maybe he had lost control over the conversation. He wouldn't really talk about her. I think maybe he thought that he'd given them enough information. I'm not sure. I'm not going to pretend like I know serial killers and how they think. When he was arrested and was spending his time in jail, he used his own blood to paint 11 skulls on different pieces of paper. They believe that each of those represents a victim. They're not sure who. So the FBI started referring to 11 victims whenever they would talk to him. And he never corrected them. He always would. If they ever had any detail wrong, he would correct them. So they started to believe that it had probably been 11 victims, but they never were able to fully narrow down who and where. When they were talking with him, when they were interrogating him, he had made a comment about how Canadians don't count. So in his way to rationalize like who was human and not, he basically believed that no one was, except for white people who believed the same way that he did. So even if you were white and believed differently, then you didn't matter as much. So, which was very interesting. He did have a Native American girlfriend, and he actually lived on a Native American reservation in Washington for a short time. And I can only imagine how that went. I'm sure he treated her terribly. But she's never really come forward with any information or anything that I am aware of. So it just makes me wonder how many people there actually are. All right, I'm going to finish up with just kind of a few things that made him stand out differently from other serial killers and just serial killers in general. He never really had one specific location. He had kill kits hidden all over the U.S. As he still does. They haven't found all of them. A lot of serial killers have like specific places or a specific type of location that they will target. He really wasn't all that picky. He killed at random. He never really seemed to have too terribly much of a plan of what he was going to do and how he was going to do it. While he placed kill kits in certain locations, he never really had a victim in mind. He would pick them in the moment. He murdered, he robbed banks, and he robbed people. And it sounds like maybe he committed arson as well. He was really just widespread and did whatever he wanted. He agreed with the FBI to basically use I think it was Google Maps or Google Earth or something like that, and he was going to show them exactly where every single kill kit was. They were going to do that a few days later. That was in the end of November that he said that. And unfortunately, in early December, he was accidentally, I don't know how you accidentally do this, but accidentally issued a razor, and he used that to kill himself on December 2nd of 2012. So there's still so many questions out there hovering, waiting to be answered. And I don't know how we will get answers. Just a giant freaking mess. And I mean, hopefully we get some. I just don't know how that will happen. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We're going to have a new one on Wednesday. Thank you for tuning in. It would really mean a lot to me if you were able to subscribe and share this with your friends who enjoy true crime as well. I hope that you guys had a great time. I really enjoyed hanging out with you. And I will see you on Wednesday for a new episode.